have seen MBA as diminished in value, primarily because people were not willing to work. People were willing to think and strategize and to do financial evaluation, but not work. And again, that's where, when you need this extra edge, the delta, that's where veterans actually bring that. So I would say, at least for me, and then again, Kellogg is a very specific place and very aloof, and admittedly, and then we like to have our lines over lunch. But at the same time, I think, at least in that arena, it actually comes up nicely.
Yeah.
See, veterans also push back.
Yeah, no. If there are other thoughts, but again, you know, that's one of the concerns that really emerged from.
Thanks again, Doctor. I appreciate it. If I may, I think one of the things that in terms of transitioning, you know, the young soldiers are also used to being told when to eat, where to be, how to, you know, what uniform to wear. You know, if they have regularly scheduled counseling sessions with their direct supervisor, they have their evaluation systems, and all of that is extremely regimented in the form of Army regulation. Or military regulation. I'm a soldier, so it's Army regulation, but Marines got their regulations too. And I think in terms of transition, I think one of the things that would significantly benefit the veteran that's transitioning, the young veteran, you know, who has lived his life like that, coming right out of high school and now has become indoctrinated and inculcated with that sense of not only the selfless service and the commitment to the group, but also the knowledge that I know where my food is coming from, I know where I'm supposed to be, I know what uniform I'm in because I need to be there. I think overcoming that, but capitalizing on the group, requires mentorship. It requires you know, a guy who's been there and done that to say, you know, hey, you know, Frank, because you're not private so-and-so anymore. It's Frank, and I might be Captain so-and-so over here, but now I'm just Paul, or whatever. It's like, hey, you know what? Let's go have a drink, and let's talk about, you know, how you think you're going to manage your schedule. Let's talk about your schedule. And because we've already gone through that, those of us that have been in the school system for a few years. And so we've learned how to adapt and take away the positives, accentuate those positives, and then apply those lessons learned to the new environment that we're now in. Because as was mentioned earlier, you know, veterans are extremely adaptive. It's what characterizes us. We're extremely flexible because the environments that we operate in are ridiculously austere and ridiculously ambiguous. And so we thrive on that. Now we're just coming into a new set of circumstances. The difference is that relationship between our authority figures. Mm-hmm. The authority figures at the campus, you know, how many times am I going to talk to the dean? Not very often, but I might see my battalion commander. I'm definitely going to see my company commander. I got my squad leader. He's in my hip pocket 24/7. And that relationship doesn't exist anymore. So overcoming that dynamic, relational dynamic, is important. And really the only way to do that is, in my opinion, is through a mentorship program. Whether it's mentorship external, which there are organizations out there like MentorVet, which I think is a great organization that we should be collaborating with, where veterans who are in the corporate community who want to help veterans be successful in their educational endeavors so that they can successfully transition into corporate America, as well as, you know, the number of veterans who are in the environment, in the community right now, who can provide insight and good guidance. So that would be my answer. I don't know if anybody else wants to
just add one thing,
that.
which is education. That we need to educate the people on the campus, as well as incoming veterans, about all the things we're talking about. I mean, what better place to think of it that way than on a college campus? I feel like we need to educate the whole society about this kind of thing.
In thinking about, Paul, your question about where are we in 5 or 10 years, I feel somewhat pessimistic about that. These wars are already becoming history to most kids.
Some of them in the classroom don't even know there's a war going on right now.
Some grown-ups, some adults don't either. I did a story a couple of years ago on a casualty, soldier who died in Afghanistan, and I wanted to kind of get a sense, as when I was writing for the Washington Post, about what the death of one soldier meant to a community in Indiana. And I went there and was struck by how many people said, Afghanistan? That's still happening?
Right.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of the university's response, or kind of what happens among students here, 5 or 10 years from now, there probably won't be, and barring another 9/11, which I think did serve that exact function, there probably won't be a great sort of bridge or enveloping embrace, to use again Don's word, unless there is an institutional push to do that in some way, whether it's a one movie or one book, or whether veterans are included in somehow in the kind of notion, the university's conception of diversity, let's say, and so that their students are exposed to what it means to be a. I think that's probably not going to happen organically, and I hope I'm wrong.
I would say, just a kind of a little background on how we got to where we're at. There were multiple conversations going on around campus about veterans, and I had actually, when the announcement came out about the formation of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, I jumped on that and I called the office and I said, hey, veterans need to be a part of that. I was redirected. In fact, that's how I became connected with Natalie Furlet, who deserves a lot of thanks and applause for all of her work. And she's very modest and whatnot, but her office, and of course Julia Jenkins and Jesse Chu and that, they really have done that. But the point that I was making is that when I went to diversity and inclusion, I was told, well, you know what, it's not really what we're talking about. We're not really talking about veterans. We're really talking about LGBT, and we're talking about minority Asians and Hispanics, and we're talking about these other small groups of people, not the veterans small group of people. And I was a little bit disappointed. I mean, that's what really the proverbial spur in my hide that got me moving forward to make to really keep pushing and pushing and pushing from my perspective. And the good news is that there were others who were out there that were pushing and pushing and pushing as well, which is embodied in our working group and everything. So I can understand that pessimism from an institutional standpoint, because I would ask the question, well, why isn't diversity and inclusion interested in that body? But even if it's not, that's the good news is that we are resilient and we are goal-oriented and mission-focused, warrior ethos type stuff.
And we have to educate those people that it is part of diversity.
And this is a good first step, I think, to doing that.
I agree.
Does anybody have any questions? I want to be mindful and respectful of your time, and if you have to go, you know what? The conversation is going to stick around here. Again, I want to thank our panelists, Dr. Gad Allen, who had to leave, Dr. Don Catherall, Professor Peter Slevin, and Mr. Rodrigo Garcia for taking this time out and participating in this discussion. I think it's been very fruitful. I think there's been some constructive ideas brought out, and I'm at least hopeful for the next year. So thank you all for coming out. I would ask. I think there's some gifts. Not for me.
Yeah, you do. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jesse, Lance. Another hard worker. I don't want to forget you. There's a lot of people. So I just want to again thank everybody for coming out. For the veterans that are with us that are still here, if you guys could stick around for just a minute and we can have a quick 5-minute huddle and talk about where we're going to go forward with this, and whoever else wants to continue the conversation. I think we've got the room for a little while. So thank you.